seeing, so I hope it's okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great.
Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. This is the District E-Club District 7710 meeting for January 24th. And we are here in North Carolina, most of us, and I'm going to hand the introduction duties over to Kathy.
Thanks, Eve. Appreciate it. It gives me great pleasure to introduce fellow Rotarian Sam Collins as the guest speaker for the Rotary E-Club of District 7710 meeting for this evening. Sam will share with us his vocational service experiences as a clinical engineer. Sam is passionate about computers and also ran his own computer consulting company for 17 years. He was also a counselor and therapist for 16 years. Sam is an avid musician, outdoorsman, and has been involved in scouting for many years. Sam is a father and grandfather of 2. Please join me in welcoming Sam as the guest speaker for our program this evening. Sam?
Well, thank you, Kathy. Wow, I feel like I've sort of been an absentee member of the E-Club, and I feel the need to apologize for that. But I really am excited to be a part of this club and am looking forward to being a more involved part of this club. It looks like that the nature of my job is going to keep me local for the next month or 2 anyway, and that's a good thing. I don't know if any of you know what a clinical engineer is. We're sort of a hidden specialty. If you've ever been to the doctor's office, or if you've ever been to the hospital, been in the hospital yourself, or been to visit someone in the hospital, when you look around you, all that equipment that you see, the bedside monitors, the x-ray machines, the infusion pump, the MRI scanner, the CT scanner, the bed you're laying in fact, all of that equipment has to be maintained. It all has to be kept in good working order. So the first slide, it says, clinical engineering is a specialty within biomedical engineering, responsible primarily for applying and implementing medical technology to optimize healthcare delivery. And that's kind of what we do. We work behind the scenes. In any big hospital, you have all kinds of engineers that work behind the scenes. You have the guys that paint the walls, the folks that keep the plumbing working, the folks that keep the electrical working. And the clinical engineers are the guys that keep every piece of equipment in that hospital that's used to treat patients up and running. And not just up and running, but calibrated. I'm sure if you go for an x-ray, you want to be sure that when that x-ray tech steps back into the control booth and sets that x-ray machine to do a very specific technique on you, that's exactly what it's going to do. And clinical engineers are the ones that make sure that happens. So just to expand on it a little further, biomedical technicians contribute enormously to successful patient outcomes in healthcare by inspecting, repairing, calibrating, designing medical equipment that grows more advanced and vital all the time. We work on everything from wheelchairs to nuclear imaging devices, including surgical robots. We ensure the safety and proper functioning of medical equipment on which patients and healthcare professionals rely in order to achieve safe, accurate diagnosis and successful treatment. These are just some of the areas, the specialties of what we do. I actually started out as a clinical engineer 10 years ago in radiology engineer. After running my computer consulting business for 16 years, I was getting bored, and my son had started working in this field. And I was talking with him about going and getting some more education, getting some more credentialing. And he suggested that I might find this field very exciting. And so I began to look into it. And I discovered that it was a field where I could do something that I love to do, which is I like fixing things. I like solving puzzles. And I could also leverage my computer skills. And so I was initially hired into this field 10 years ago to work as a radiology field engineer. And I was trained on radiology equipment. I was trained in computed radiography, digital radiography, MRI and CT injectors, X-ray laser printers, and then also did general radiology on call about once every 5 or 6 weeks, which meant I had to take care of pretty much anything after hours that came up in general radiology. One thing that you might find interesting, I don't know how much of you know much about radiology, but you might be surprised to find out that most X-ray equipment generates X-rays, but it has absolutely nothing radioactive in it at all. You can take an X-ray machine apart, and there is absolutely no component in an X-ray machine that is radioactive at all. X-rays are generated by electricity, and they're high energy photons. They are in the same energy field range as the radiation that comes off of particle radiation, like uranium or any of the dangerous radioactive materials that we're all familiar with. And nuclear medicine does use isotopes. Those are isotopes. Now, in nuclear medicine, that is the one field in imaging where they actually inject you with an isotope. And the isotope has an extremely short half-life. Plutonium has a half-life of about 10,000 years. The isotopes they inject you with at the hospital when they do nuclear medicine, they have half-lives of about 45 minutes. And the rule of thumb is after 10 half-lives, there is absolutely no radiation coming out of the particles. And they put you inside of what they call gamma cameras, and as that isotope decays, it renders energy that can be used to create an image of a specific system that they want to watch functioning in your body, maybe your kidney or maybe your liver. CT scans, regular X-rays, they're used for looking at hard surfaces inside your body like bones or dense organs. The MRI technology, MRIs are magnetic radiation, and they can't see, they see water. They don't see the solid tissues in your body. So when you go in for an MRI, the image they get from that doesn't really show any of your bones. Whereas the regular X-rays, it shows only shadows of your bones and the denser organs. Computed radiography is a field that is kind of on its way out. Let me flip to the next screen. Here's some pictures of different kinds of equipment that I've worked on over the last 10 years. In the upper left-hand corner is an anesthesiologist sitting in an operating room, and he's in charge of what looks like they're Philips monitoring systems that are tied to his anesthesia machine. And all of those are all of that equipment that he uses are stuff the biomeds and the clinical engineers keep up and keep calibrated. His job is to monitor you, and also that's all tied to another screen that's up over the table that the surgeon is looking at, so that the surgeon can just look up and see what your heart rate, your blood pressure stuff is, and he can request from the anesthesiologist if he wants him to change anything that he's looking at in front of him, so he can monitor you more carefully while he's doing the surgery. The thing to the right, that's an infusion pump. Anybody that's ever been in the hospital and had a blood transfusion or had fluids given in, that's how they put it in. Bottom left, obviously, is a bed. The hospital beds have become pretty elaborate and fancy pieces of machinery these days. The thing to the right of that is a CR reader. That stands for computed radiography. And what's happened is for many, many years, X-rays were taken on film. And X-ray room costs anywhere from $1.5 million to $2 million to install in a hospital. And a lot of hospitals wanted to get more time out of their old film rooms before they spent the $2 or $3 million to upgrade to digital. And so most of the big photography companies like Kodak and Konica and Agfa and Fuji, they came up with this new technology where they created a plate that looked like the photo plate, but it had two crystal plates inside of it. One of them that would phosphoresce in the presence of X-rays, and then that photonic energy released by that would be recorded in a plate of galenium crystals. And then you put that plate in that CR75 there, and it uses a certain frequency of laser to trigger that photonic energy that's stored in those crystals to release out, to be gathered and converted into a digital signal, and then recorded as a digital X-ray. So it allows an older hospital or a smaller hospital that can't afford to spend the kind of money for digital radiography to keep using their film rooms without having to use film. The device at the bottom of the screen there in the middle, that's a CT scanner. I don't know if any of you've seen those. The one up on the upper right that looks similar to it is an MRI scanner. The difference in the two is the MRI scanner uses these huge magnets. Most MRI scanners create anywhere from 4 to 6 Tesla fields of magnetic energy. To give you an idea how powerful that is, before I could go in the room to work on one of those, I had to take my wallet, my watch, my glasses, my rings, everything that could be affected by magnetism off of me before I could walk in the room. First time I went in, I'd forgotten a paperclip in my shirt pocket. And I walked in the room, and when I got to within about 10 feet of the machine, suddenly the front of my shirt was pulling out really hard. And from 10 feet away, it was trying to pull that paperclip away from me and pull it into the magnetic field. We're shown training films when we're being trained to work on these things, where a transport person in the hospital walked a patient into an MRI suite, and while they were helping them out of their wheelchair, the magnetic field grabbed the chair and pulled it from across the room into the center of the MRI. And they put 4 come-alongs on the chair and could not pull it out of the magnetic field. They actually had to quench the magnets and shut down the MRI before they could get the chair out of there. Now, the bad thing about that is that if you quench those magnets, it takes 24 hours to bring the MR back up again. And hospitals feel like they're losing about $3,500 every 15 minutes when the MRI is not working. So it's a big moneymaker for them. The thing to the left of that is a heart start MRX. That's a defibrillator. It's kind of a big brother to a defibrillator, actually. You've seen those in the black or red leather bags on fire trucks and in ambulances. You also will see them on crash carts in hospitals. You'll see them in any operating room, anywhere where they might have to call a crash code, try to save your life. That's the piece of technology at the center of all that. The things down on the bottom right, I'm sure you recognize, those are ICU incubators. Those are for the neonates, the little bitty babies that are born too soon. I've had a lot of personal experience with that. My son, who is now 40, was born in 1977. He weighed 1,135 grams. He was in the intensive care nursery at Baptist Hospital for 9.5 weeks. While he was there, I got to see a whole lot more than I wanted to of all this kind of equipment. But he survived. He did great. He was very, very fortunate. He was one of few. While he was there, my wife and I, we were put in a group with 7 other sets of parents. 4 of them had twins. All of our children were in the ICU. And this was back in 1977. They didn't have a lot of the technology they have now. There were 10 children attached to our group of all of us parents. We were the only ones that got to take our baby home. So the mortality rate for infants was way higher back then. Now with the technology, they can save babies even younger. Our baby was born in the 28th week. 10 weeks he came home, he was fine. And he's, I'm the proud father of 2 grandchildren by him. I couldn't be prouder of him. The pieces of those funny looking blue things in the middle of the screen, those are dialysis machines. Those are used, of course, to filter blood. People who have kidney or liver failure, they get dialysis. And what you may not know is that every time that machine gets used, it has to be taken off the floor where it was used after that one use, taken down to a technician, and he has to completely break it down, clean it, and completely restock it with chemicals and everything else to put it back in service. So every one of those machines has about a 10 or 12 hour turnaround time before it gets to go back in use. So anyway, that's what I do. I'm a clinical field engineer, which means I'm not specifically attached to a hospital. In fact, well, when I was with Novant, I was a field engineer. Novant has 14 hospitals and about 40 imaging centers. And I had a truck, and I had about 175 pieces of x-ray equipment, and I spent 4,000 miles a month on the road taking care of my equipment. Now I work for a company called CSA Solutions, and we're a service company that contracts ourselves to hospitals or to, right now I'm working on as a subcontractor through my company for Philips Medical. And I've been working with Philips Medical for the last 2 years. We're cranking up a project right now that's just starting this week at UNC and at Duke, where we'll be in there upgrading the software in all the little wearable telemetry devices and all of the bedside monitors and nursing central monitoring stations throughout that entire hospital. Just the telemetry devices, as I understand it, we have 675 of those that have to be upgraded between Duke and UNC and Moses Cone in Greensboro. And we have until the 17th of March to get them all done. So they keep us busy. And that's, I guess, all I have to say about what I do. Does anybody have any questions?
I do have a question.
Yes.
Sam, you said that MRI uses magnetic field. How does it affect metal plates, dental implants, metal fillings? How does it not affect like an amalgam or metal fillings in your mouth?
Well, it depends on if the device, if the things that are the implants that are in your body or in your mouth, if they're ferrous and they can be affected by a magnetic field, then you can't go into that magnetic field. So if you have a pacemaker, or if you have something that would be a ferrous material, the way they get around that is most medical devices that are implanted are made of non-ferrous metals, like titanium and copper and this sort of thing, so that they don't respond to magnetic fields. They don't affect it. They're not affected that way. And the way an MRI works with the magnets is that if you've ever been around one or been near one or heard one, when they're doing the MRI, it's like whack, 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 really loud. And what that is they're actually alternating the magnetic field. 45 to 90 degrees. They're doing it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the hydrogen, the water molecules in your body, the hydrogen atoms are actually being forced to change polarity. And as they do that, they give off a radio frequency. And that's why they can use any tissues. That's why the MRI images only show the tissues in your body that have water in them. They don't show bones. They don't show teeth. You wouldn't use an MRI to look at teeth or to look at your bones. You'd use an MRI to look at, say, a nerve impingement in your spine. If you wanted to see a broken bone or image it, you'd use x-rays, because x-rays, and I know everybody's probably had an x-ray. You might find this interesting. When you go for an x-ray and they put you in that room and they cover you with lead, and then the technician is wearing a lead apron, and they set you in front of the machine, and then she goes back around the corner, and then she fires the machine, right? And you think, oh my God, all this radioactive energy. Well, the x-rays that come out of the x-ray machine actually come out in a fine beam, just like a laser would, pointed straight at you. and they're targeted with plates in the X-ray machine so that they only strike a very specific part of you. And then one of three things happens. They either go through you, in which case they expose the digital plate beyond you. Some portion of them are absorbed by you and don't come out. And that's what creates the contrast and the gradations in the X-ray plate. And some of them come out of you in a random direction, and that's called scatter radiation. And all that lead that's put on you, and all the lead that the technician is wearing, and all the lead to around the room is to protect people from the scatter radiation that comes out of you when they shoot you with the X-ray. And the other thing is that the high energy photons are not, they don't last. You fire a high energy photon, and as it scatters out of your body, the amount of energy it has is reduced the inverse of the square of the distance from you. So it degrades away very quickly. And the other thing about high energy photons is that they're not persistent radiation. If they were, if you think about it, the X-ray table would get so radioactive and hot, they'd have to replace it 3 or 4 times a week. So there's nothing residual about high energy photons. Now, ultrasound uses sound. They're actually shooting you with sound waves, and they use that to roughly image things. Although that's gotten the technology of interpreting the ultrasound as it waves as they pass through your body has gotten lots better. But I've always worked specifically in either imaging, or for the last 2 years I've worked with the defibrillators and the monitors and the telemetry devices. I had exposure while I was getting trained to CT and MRI and the anesthesia machines, and they make you learn a little bit about every bit of it.
Sam, did you say that photons are used in X-ray machines?
They're not used, they're created.
Yes, created in X-ray machines.
An X-ray tube is like a big fancy light bulb. And it has, if you know anything about, this may get too technical, I'll try to keep it simple now, but the tube has a cathode and an anode, which is the positive and the negative. And the anode actually, the tube is sealed. And then inside the tube, there's a spinning anode that's kind of mushroom shaped, it is an angle at the top. It's kind of like this, and it's spinning. And then halfway between it and the cathode is a little filament, like a light bulb, actually a long filament and a small filament. And when the technician says they're going to take an X-ray, what they do is they set how much voltage they're going to shoot across the tube, and how much current they're going to send through the filament, and how much time they're going to do it. And so what happens is, in a split second, the first thing that happens is current goes to the filament and it glows white hot. Well, that white hot is a cloud of electrons, okay? It's excited around that filament. And then they slam that voltage across the tube. And the cathode side is negative, and so it repels those electrons. And it literally triggers a little tiny lightning bolt that strikes that spinning anode. And as that little tiny light bulb, which is a concentrated blast of electrons, strikes that, it displaces the electrons in the anode itself. And as those electrons are kind of shuffling around, every time they change a valence level at the atomic structure, it releases photonic energy, and that's where that comes from. Now, the photonic energy goes out in all directions. So the tube is lined with lead all the way around, and it's also surrounded by oil circulating devices to keep it cool. Because let's say you put 75,000 volts of electricity across the tube to generate an X-ray, which is about what they use for a standard chest X-ray. Only 1 to 1/2 of 1% of that energy actually becomes X-rays. All the rest of that becomes heat, and it has to be dissipated away. You can't just fire an X-ray machine over and over and over again. It won't work. What was I going to say? Well, the other thing that's interesting about that is that the X-ray tubes burn out after about 4 or 5 years, and they have to be replaced. They're a consumable part of the equipment. So the clinical engineers, we take great care to keep them calibrated and keep them maintained. The rooms have to be thoroughly PM'd and cleaned and calibrated and inspected at least once every 6 months, or anytime and every time a radiology tech says, hey, there's a little something funny going on with this machine here. Then they go in and they go over it, and it's very, very carefully checked out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sam, I have a question. Are you responsible for the hardware, or does your expertise in computer science, computer technology enter into the maintenance as well that you do?
Well, every piece of biomedical equipment is run on software. It's all run by some level of complexity of computer. And so all of it has operating systems, and some of it's Android, some of it's Windows, some of it's what's the one that has never really caught on? Linux. A lot of like.
Don't tell my son that he won't like that you said it didn't really catch on. But.
Well, it's gone into a kind of a niche market. Okay, it's never really caught on to the general public. It certainly is. I have a nephew who absolutely he won't program in anything but Linux. Mm-hmm. I chose a long time ago to focus my attention on DOS and Windows. I actually built my first computer as a hobbyist out of spare parts in 1985.
So you're working on both the computer technological side and the hardware. You have to break down the machinery and make sure that the software is up to snuff and programmed correctly and updated, et cetera, et cetera.
And I have to also make sure that the mechanical parts of the machines work properly as well. I have to tear them down. Like in a computed radiography machine, there's not just a computer running the whole thing. There's a 30-watt helium neon laser that has to be targeted, and all the mirrors have to be aligned, and the mechanical device that causes the laser beam to sweep, all of that has to be properly aligned and kept clean and calibrated as well. Because when that plate goes down into the CR reader, it's actually moving down as the laser sweeps in distances that are measured in angstroms, because it's trying to create a completely unified X-ray image from this, what's the photonic energy that's being given off on this crystal plate.
So you really are the Renaissance man. You went from counseling and therapy to computer tech to clinical engineering, and somehow you made it all work, huh? So that's pretty impressive.
I'm named after my grandpa, and he was absolutely a Renaissance man. My first wife and I loved helping people, and we started out in the early 70s running group homes for emotionally disturbed children. And I started and ran 3 of them in Greensboro. I helped set up the Runaway Center in Winston-Salem and did relief weekends at the boys' home in Winston-Salem at the time when my son was born as a preemie. And then my wife and I moved to Durham, and we actually ran a group home over on Driver Street for about 3 years. And then our marriage fell apart. It's just too much pressure. When you run a group home, you live in the home with the kids, and you're on the job 24/7. And so, but I didn't lose my love for it, and I found a different direction. And so after that, I became a drug and alcohol counselor, and I went to work at a hospital in Winston-Salem called Charter Mandela. It used to be called the Mandela Center. And I went to work there as their primary counselor. I carried my caseload on the open unit for 14 months while they built the Genesis Recovery Center. And then we moved in, and we had a 24-bed unit. And at that point, we hired a second counselor, and I helped train him. And once I had help, then it was up to me to write the aftercare program and run that. Because I'm an Outward Bound graduate, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Outward Bound. I was actually the only member of the staff who was credentialed to work with the recreational therapy people, we had a high adventures ropes course that we used as part of our treatment milieu. And I was actually the only counselor that was credentialed to go up on the high ropes with the recreational therapist. And I did that until right at 1990. But I started playing around with computers in 1981. And I had learned enough about them. By 1984, 1985, I decided I wanted to try building one for myself. And by 1991, well, I realized I had to stop counseling. I was just totally burned out. I'm the kind of person I overcommit. I have to watch out for myself about that. I'm intense, and I've been told I'm a big dose, and it's probably true. So I made a decision to leave counseling, and I floundered around for about 2 years trying to figure out what to do with myself. And I was involved in a scouting program in a big church in Winston-Salem at the time, and several people had told me, "Why don't you be a computer consultant? You know so much about computers." And I thought, you have to know everything about computers to be a consultant. But 2 men came to work with me as volunteers in the scouting program. One of them was a full-time paid programmer, and the other one was in the IT department at Wachovia Bank. And I found out very quickly, talking to them, that I'd forgotten more about computers than they knew. I'd been a hacker by that time for almost 10 years. And so I talked it over with my wife at that time, and I decided I would try it. I was working 4 jobs to keep the bills paid. And so I was working 3, so I took on a 4th job. I started, I made up flyers, and I took them around to the big box stores. This was in 1990. So a lot of people were selling computers, but not a lot of people knew about them yet. And I made up flyers, and I took them around to all the magazine shops and talked the store owners into letting me hang my flyers around where their computer magazines were. And that's how I began my business. And on the 17 years I did it, I never advertised. I never even had an ad in the yellow pages. I just stayed busy. One thing led to another. People would refer me. I made it a point to be honest with people, never to take advantage of them. So many people have had bad experiences with trying to get computer work done. A perfect example is that last Christmas, like Christmas before last, a friend of mine, his girlfriend, her laptop wouldn't charge. And he took it to a company here in town, I won't say their names, that are famous for doing repairs. And they were told that it would be an $800 repair. And so he called me because, he knows me. And he said, can you help me? And I said, well, I can't tell you if I can help you until I see it, but if I can help you, I will. So he brought me the computer. Turned out all it needed was a new plug inside the case to plug the power supply into, and a new battery. The parts cost $75, and I charged him for an hour of my time. And it's that kind of, I guess it's because I've treated people that way that I've never had to advertise. Now, 10 years ago, when I became a clinical engineer, I made a decision to formally shut down my business. And I don't actually technically run the company called Computer Consultations anymore, but I still do computer work on the side for my friends. Anybody who knows me, if they have a problem with their desktop or their laptop, they call me, because frankly, there isn't much I can't do with a desktop or a laptop. The computer I'm talking to you on now is one I built. It's actually sort of a Frankenstein that I started back in, I told you I built that first computer in 1985. This computer is a logical progression of that computer. Every couple of years, I would decide I wanted a better one. And so I would tear that one apart and make me a better one. And usually I would pass on the parts to my son. And then he would build himself the best computer he could with those. And that's how I trained him to be a good computer guy. So I don't know. I guess you know pretty much everything about me now.
What an amazing career span. It's just fascinating to hear your story, Sam. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And thank you for being in our Rotary Club. And we're really happy to have you with us tonight. And one thing we do is always give a certificate of thanks, which Jeanne prepared. It's our virtual certificate of thanks for
Let me say one last thing, or my wife will shoot me. I've got to at least mention her. I can't make this all about me. I'm married to a wonderful woman now. Her name is Tamala, Pamela, but with a T. And she's a nurse at Duke. She's been there for 25 years. She works in the transfer center. She was a critical care nurse up until 5 years ago, and just her back and her knees just couldn't take it anymore. But she's a wonderful lady. We've been together for almost 18 years now, and the love of my life. So I just had to mention her before we were all through with this.
Thank you so much. I look forward to meeting her. So this can go to Sam and Tamala. We'll share it. So thank you very much. And if anyone wants to stay online, Sam, if you don't mind staying online to answer any more questions anyone else has, we're going to officially close out the meeting. And Sharon has graciously agreed to lead us in the 4-way test.
The 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you so much, Sharon. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that. And thanks for bearing with us. And now we know why you were so amazing at the technical part of getting our meeting launched this evening, Sam. You were completely unfazed by our technical difficulties prior to starting. So thank you, everyone. That's Rotary for this evening. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.